Welcome back, guys, to Brisket Medic, and I'm actually filming this on Super Bowl Sunday. I know this is probably a Tuesday when you're watching it, and if you're new here, please make sure you stick around, go through some of our other videos, make sure you like and hit subscribe. If you're returning, I do appreciate it. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about spritzing. Now, it's been a little thing that I've seen on TikTok and other platforms of people saying that spritzing is a myth, that you don't need to do it, and this and that. Don't believe everything you see on the internet, kids. Listen, there are certain cases where spritzing is not needed. Steaks, short cooks, anything like that, spritzing isn't needed. Now, to understand why spritzing is needed and when it's needed, you have to understand something called evaporative cooling. Now, I'm not talking about the air conditioner or the water fan on the side of your house or whatever it may be, but the same principle in physics are there. Evaporative cooling. So you take a object such as a brisket, and it has a lot of mass, has some insulation to it, and that does not transfer heat well. It's going to stop it, it's going to block it, and it's going to take a while for that heat to transfer through it. It's insulated. Now, water, it naturally wants to achieve equilibrium, a state in which opposing forces or influences are balanced, or homeostasis, I guess you could say, equilibrium. Homeostasis, the tendency towards a relatively stable equilibrium between independent elements, especially as maintained by physiological processes. So water, whether it's in the liquid form, solid form, or gas form, it's going to want to achieve equilibrium. So the theory is that you don't need to spritz your brisket because it slows down the cook time and it washes off your bark. Now, here's the thing. You can wash your bark off by spritzing at the wrong time because you're spraying all of your rubs off before it has a chance to set in. Now, we're talking about an 8 to 10 hour cook. There's absolutely no reason to spritz it before 2 to 3 hours, period. Let your bark get set. So that's out of the question. That's a bad excuse or a bad reason not to spritz anything like that. So let's talk about evaporative cooling and how that works. Have you ever gotten out of the pool and a gust of wind hit you and you just were really, really cold, but it was 110 degrees outside? That's because of evaporative cooling. As that moisture is evaporating off of your body because you've been in the pool, your skin is saturated with water, so that moisture is evaporating off of your body into the dry air, achieving equilibrium. That energy needed to do that will draw that heat off of the surface of your skin, causing you to feel cool. That's how evaporative cooling works. Now, the same thing happens with a brisket. Now, when a brisket is cooking, all that moisture inside, because remember, it's a big piece of meat, all that moisture inside is trying to make its way out to achieve equilibrium. And if you have an offset smoker or a smoker where a lot of convection and airflow is going around that brisket, that evaporative cooling is actually going to be ramped up and going faster, because as that surface dries, more water gets pulled up, surface dries, more water gets pulled up, surface dries, more water gets pulled up. Moisture is always going to be rising to the surface every time that it dries. And because of that, you're going to be lowering the temperature of that brisket. That's evaporative cooling. It's using that heat and energy, it's drawing it out and using it to evaporate it to hopefully achieve equilibrium. It's trying to get the saturation levels of both the air and the brisket the same, or the selective humidity and the relative humidity to equal the same. So what happens when you spritz it is you're allowing it to have surface moisture without drawing moisture out of the brisket itself. Essentially, you are moisturizing the air in the smoker. Now, you can achieve this also with a water pan. Humidified smokers actually help this, and you don't have to spritz as much, but spritzing is still needed because even with a water pan, you're only going to raise the humidity probably 20 to 30%, which is quite a bit, don't get me wrong, but it's not going to negate the need of spritzing. So Why spritzing? We've talked about how it affects the surface. Why is it important? Because at some point, right, that brisket's going to keep itself moist, and it's fine. But no, here's the problem. When you don't spritz and you allow the brisket to excrete its own moisture to allow that surface to stay moist or wet to achieve equilibrium or attempt to achieve equilibrium, you're drawing all of the moisture out of the inside of that brisket. It's because that brisket is adiabatic. We talked about that earlier. Adiabatic, relating to or denoting a process or condition in which heat does not enter or leave the system concerned. It's a heavily insulated source. Heat doesn't just blow through it, okay? That's what that means. So as you're drawing all of that moisture out of it to cook it faster, and this is why a stall happens, okay? The reason brisket takes 8 to 10 hours to cook is because those collagens and those connective tissues inside of there, they break down better the longer it sits at 157 to 165 degrees. The longer that stall is, that's actually better for your cook. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not about cooking a brisket for 12 to 16 hours. I'm just not about that. I'd rather have an 8-hour brisket than a 12-hour brisket than a 16-hour brisket and all that good stuff, okay? But I do know that the stall is very important. And spritzing a brisket, it helps that stall happen to where those collagens and those connective tissues break down to where you have a tender brisket, and spritzing it is going to help it be moist as well. Again, you're spritzing your brisket after 2 or 3 hours, probably 3 to 4 to be the best. You're spritzing it. That means you're keeping moisture inside, and it's not drawing that heat out of the inside, so you're allowing that brisket to cook more evenly. Now you're going to have this less in something like a Weber or an ugly drum smoker. It's not going to be as prevalent, and you can probably even get away with not spritzing on a Weber, but you're definitely going to have dry spots because of equilibrium. Spritzing is always a good thing. Now you can go overboard with spritzing. You can spritz so much that you cool that entire piece of meat down and it never gets cooked, and you wash every bit of rub off of it. Don't do that. Get to learn your method of cooking. Now, I can tell you at 3.5 hours at 275 degrees, 3.5
hours and 12 seconds, open the lid up, spritz for 2 seconds with 1 part water, 1/2 part Worcestershire sauce, and that's going to give you the exact time, the exact temperature, and it's going to work out perfectly because of everything that's involved. And the Worcestershire sauce is going to contain all the electrolytes that it needs to help the sodium process quick from switching
over. No, it doesn't work. Why? Because we all live at different climates. We all live at different pressures, at different heights and things like that. So you have to figure out when that sweet spot is for you. And that's why they're called pit masters. So guys, I hope this helps. I hope you understand that there's a little bit behind the idea of spritzing, evaporative cooling, and how the cooking works for a brisket. Again, if I've helped you out or give you any knowledge, make sure you hit that like button. Leave a comment down below about any questions you may have. I've got some big news coming for the Old Country pecos that I have just gotten today, just 30 minutes ago. I got my plasma cutter in, and I can't wait to show you some of the other modifications we'll be doing to it. Guys, I love you. This is going to be Tuesday by the time you see this. I hope y'all had a very safe Super Bowl party or Super Bowl weekend, and remember, drink more water. Make sure you hit that like, subscribe. Can't wait to answer more questions for you guys.